Basically, you can't do any trade with Cuba or you can't trade with the US. No one's crazy enough to piss off the US unless you're Hugo Chavez, and who actually enjoys it. And so as a result, Cuban society pretty much had its lifeline from the outside world cut off almost instantaneously. Oil imports fell by about 90%, fertilizers, other agricultural fell by 80%. They lost 50% of their wheat imports overnight, and and basically all their development kind of screeched to a halt. And it kind of approximates, a lot of people think that this approximates the kind of trade slowdown and retrenchment as you get when oil prices go through the roof and all of a sudden you can't afford to ship stuff at places. Here we go. So they implemented wartime rationing. Everyone got a lot fitter and healthier, so obesity in Cuba is now kind of unheard of. There are also there are geeks though still in Cuba, you'd be happy to know. They're just a lot fitter. Petroleum became pretty much unavailable, so people would queue up along the side of the road waiting for a government truck to come by, and they actually instituted a law where you actually had to stop and give people lifts, which is a great place to hitchhike. Heavy industry and technology imports pretty much stopped, and healthcare went from treating people who were ill to preventing people becoming ill because they could no longer afford the real sort of like really advanced acute care which Cuba had been famed for providing beforehand. They had a crash conversion to organic agriculture. Everyone now has a vegetable garden, and you go to work, do your thing, come home, and dig your potatoes or whatever. They moved to biological pest control. Cuba still is stalked by the threat of famine. So if, for instance, there was a hurricane or any other kind of real serious disruption, it is likely you would see a short-term famine in Cuba without external aid. And all this is only possible because, crushing state control, really. I mean, Fidel, it is one of, Transparency International rates it is one of the most unfree places on earth. But all of this was only possible because of crushing state control. All of these things were mandated by the central government. In a less ordered society, other things might happen, which I'll show you next. Cuban hacking. So yeah, the Cubans actually became very adept at keeping everything from before the embargo going. So you see some very odd things. Ancient cars, 1950s Chevrolets and Cadillacs, with Lada engines or tractor engines bolted to them. Weird fusions, like for instance, there was this great thing that I saw, which the guy wouldn't let me take a photo of it, but it's an old 1950s American Frigidaire refrigerator repaired with parts from a Cadillac. So it is in fact actually a Cadillac refrigerator. It's like kind of half an engine kind of bolted to the side, and it looks very, very weird. The guy was very, very proud of it, and he had no formal education at all. No parts and resource make for weird and wrong engineering. Everything is recycled, so you throw away your old refrigerator, and like vultures, people descend upon it and rip it apart, and all the bits get recycled and something else weird and wrong. And there's just more limitations to overcome. East Africa, I spent some time in northern Kenya and Somalia, having 12-year-olds wave rocket-propelled grenades under my nose, which wasn't a lot of fun. Most of East Africa is effectively priced out of the oil and technology markets. So development kind of stalled and started going backwards. They're all dependent on food aid. Chronic drought made everything worse, and they are weak governments and dictators. And so you saw this descent into lawlessness. So, you get warlords, gangs, militias, and other crazy stuff. But you also still see some very enterprising hackers. This one guy had taken two old alternators out of an old Russian tank and had built a power station for his village out of the remains of a smashed Toyota truck, these two alternators and a home-wound rectifier, which I thought was quite impressive. And that was in Somalia. That's how they kept power going there. Thank God, though, however, there was no, in East Africa, there's no Tina Turner. And this actually should be a Toyota truck with a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the back of it, because that's what they substitute for a tank there. Hackers, yeah, you've seen this before from Breeze Talk. Hackers probably make bad farmers, so you're going to need to find something else useful to do. But not to worry. There's plenty to do. If everything goes to hell in a handbasket economically, you will have loads of opportunities to actually become the keystone members of whatever society comes next, because you have the knowledge to turn all the broken old stuff into something new and useful. Yeah? Normal engineers do not get trained to do that. You have the right attitude and know how to do it, because you do it every day. So we're going to have to learn to do more with less, which is great, really, because as everybody knows, you can still get a really old shit computer to do something very cool with just some interesting software. Is that not true? Yeah, see? Linux still works on my old 386 at home. It's great, sort of. As we all know from our previous definition of hackers, hackers love overcoming limitations. Well, I can't think of any other. This is the ultimate sort of limitation circumvention exercise. World is fucked. Make it go. So, some key skills after the end of everything. Here we go. So you're going to have to learn to teach. You're going to have to learn how to teach people how to hack their environment into somewhere where they can actually live with just the rubbish that was left from beforehand. Basic technical knowledge, you're probably going to need some of that, so I suggest hoarding books on electrical engineering and sort of basic mechanics. Appropriate technology. Who went to Breeze Talk? Yeah. How many people downloaded Breeze Talk?
It's not available yet.
Oh, okay, all right. How many people want to download Breeze Talk? Yeah, there we go, much better. See? Wow, you don't pay much attention, do you? Okay, look it up. Lame. Pay a fee to the CCC, join. Magazines like Make are really quite interesting because they actually teach people those key skills, those key construct it, build it, make it yourself skills, which, ignoring the idea of hackers being this very narrow, yeah, there you go, narrow thing about breaking into stuff. If you think about circumventing limitations and just doing interesting things with technology, Make is brilliant. Oh, are we under attack by Klingons or something? Okay, so anyway, yeah, my time is up, so just apply the hacker's attitude to everything and you'll be fine, and just remember that attitude is everything. If you stay positive and learn some of the, and make sure that you have those key skills and key understandings and keep an eye on the situation, you will prosper. You will become the master in that master-blaster relationship, but without the fat guy and no chainsaw and no Tina Turner. Okay, and that's it. Hey? I don't know. Do we have any time for any questions? Yeah, we do. Okay. The rest of you just leave quietly.
My question is very simple. If you will be the president of the United States and you will be to control the price of tax on oil, what would be the ideal price per liter that you would somehow put in practice?
Per liter. Oil.
I know that you have gallons, but in Europe we have liters, which is
I live in London. I do liters.
Okay.
It's cool. You would probably have to make gasoline as expensive as coffee, like Starbucks coffee, before you actually start to see a real impact on people's driving habits. So you're looking at UK prices. So over maybe $2 or $3 a litre for gasoline before you started to see a really significant impact on the driving habits. Yeah, and you're starting to see it. You're starting to see it happen now. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Yeah, this chap here.
Do you really think that there's no hope that technology could save us? For example, with the Earth X Prize helping along innovation.
The problem is that it's one of time. If we had the Earth X Prize 30 years ago, yes, you could do it because it takes time to build the systems. And the problem that we've got is that a lot of the changes have a lot of inertia built, have a lot of momentum built into them. So we've already pushed, because we've already given it an initial shove, the system now has so much momentum behind it that even if we started on a crash mitigation program now, the odds are pretty good that even by the time we built it and put it in place, we would then need to wait for another century or more before we actually started to see some of those effects. So what we're really looking at now is a scenario where we have to adapt to the changes that are already in train. You know, Earth X Prize and the rest of it all notwithstanding, simply because the system has already got so much inertia that we've already started moving it, and it's already started, and there's nothing you can do to actually push it back. Does that answer your question to some extent?
It might be possible to trap carbon dioxide.
Yeah, that's very, very true. But again, you know, you have to remember that you're looking at multiple decades to build the systems, and those changes may already have happened within those decades. As you were building it, you'd have had to build it in advance, and that's what I'm getting at. So yes, this gentleman here.
What's the effect of the? I know that I had a teacher at university who is member of the IPCC.
Yep.
And he told me that basically the whole issue is about those 20 years when you released CO2 in the atmosphere. The effect of thermal effect on the atmosphere is only happening 20 years later.
Yeah, that's right.
So basically the heating, the climate change that we are having somehow now is the effect of the gas that was emitted 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, one of the really interesting things is that the hotter it gets, the less able the biosphere is to soak up the CO2 that we subsequently produce, because obviously as the concentration of CO2 goes up, it gets warmer, photosynthesis becomes less efficient at higher temperatures, and plants actually soak up less CO2 in a high CO2 environment. They always kind of maintain the same rate of growth. One of the reasons that the dinosaurs may have had to have such huge bodies is because the quality of the plant material they were eating, it grew really, really quickly, but it was very low quality. Simply because it was existing in this high temperature, high CO2 regime. You see a lot of ferns and things which have virtually no nutritional value at all. And all we're doing is quite literally pushing the world back to the same conditions that actually formed the oil and the gas in the first place. So, we're just speeding up the whole cycle. Every time you drive around in your car, all you're doing actually is you're driving a very, very little volcano. It's spewing out carbon dioxide and other stuff, which actually originally came out of the Earth in the first place. Does that answer your question? Is that a good explanation? Okay, anyone else? Anyone want to throw random abuse? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, hi. There is a theory that the theory of peak oil has actually been invented by the oil companies themselves in order to keep the price high. Could you speak to that? Like some of the things I've heard mentioned is that there's the reserve in Iraq, say, that has been untapped now for 20 years. There's Iran, which has really not reached their peak yet. Then the oil fields in Russia, and then, say, the polar north.
Okay, we'll address those one at a time. Okay, Iraq. Yes, it is true that Iraq's reserves have not been tapped for the last 20 years. However, that being said, if you bring that stuff on stream, all you do is actually you just push the peak back, because you see these resource extraction peaks in pretty much everything. And I used to be, I did a lot of geology earlier on, and I definitely think it's true. And if you talk to anyone in the petroleum geology department at my own university, they would pretty much all agree with me that in fact actually it's on a finite curve. The Earth simply just doesn't make oil and gas at the same rate that we burn it. Iran actually peaked out in 1978. And what the Iranians have actually started doing is the Iranians went on this crash program of actually re-injecting water and gas back into their reservoirs to keep them pressurized. And they're now actually having real problems because they've reached kind of the limit of where they can go. One of the reasons why there are some Middle Eastern observers think that the Iranians are actually building nuclear plants, not necessarily to go for the bomb, but because, quite simply, they can no longer afford to actually burn oil and gas to produce electricity.